to ensure that armed forces are effectively trained to deal with civilians who are also engaged in policing the seas and in maritime security management. I should say that at one of the special sessions yesterday afternoon on transnational threats and armed forces, this question of how armed forces are properly trained and to be made more interoperable, as it were, with civilian forces, and how both the armed forces and the civilians can operate with a common view of the relevant international law that applies to the management of these issues came up. So I think we might try to explore this question also in plenary. I will try to give preference to those who I was not able to call on in the prior session. So in that spirit, I'll call first on Chris Nelson. The others, please keep your name tags up so as he asks a question, I can take your names down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chipman. I found myself, in listening to General Yang, wondering how you gentlemen were reacting, particularly to his very strong claim, his statement, endorsement of the 2002 Code of Conduct, for example, where you say to yourselves, gee, that sounds great. You guys talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk. General Tran specifically mentioned the recent May 26 incident, and Minister Guzman mentioned finding the construction materials on the disputed area of land as two recent examples. For those of us in Washington, sometimes these things only appear on our radar screen like that. My question to you is, do incidents such as May 26 or incidents such as the construction materials, are those representative of the reality of Chinese actions? Or is General Yang generally speaking correctly? And I'm wondering how the Chinese have responded to you, specifically to your démarches on these subjects. And then finally, if you forgive me, in listening to Secretary Gates yesterday, and afterwards some of the hallway conversations that make the Shangri-La conference so important, so valuable, several people asked me if I was surprised that Secretary Gates was not more pointed in his discussion and criticism of Chinese activities, similarly to last year, the tone of last year's thing. It sounded to me like some of the friends and neighbors here were hoping that the U.S. would continue a much sharper, more pointed approach. So, again, are Chinese actions belying Chinese words? Are you satisfied with the level of American continued focus on this? Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. I think what we'll do is we'll take the fuller collective questions and comments I can and come back to the panel. Mr. Shah?
Thank you. I have two questions. One is regarding the oil and gas potential in the South China Sea. It's usually referred to as the second Persian Gulf, but this really results from the 1948 study when even two-dimensional seismic survey technology was not good enough. So I'm trying to say we need to bring ourselves back to reality a little bit. We need to find out the geological potential, and on top of that, commercial viability. You talk about wind and solar, it's good, but the specific question is this. From 2005 to 2007, the Republic of Philippines, the Republic of Vietnam, and China, they had the national oil companies of the three countries starting a joint seismic exploration of the disputed regions. And the fate of that project became a bit of a mystery. Can we restart similar projects? That's the first question. Second question has to do with fisheries. If we think about Somalia pirates, it's because fishermen ran out of fish to catch. The same is true of much of the South China Sea. When we pursue code of conduct, we pursue demarcation, only we need to bear in mind that we have to find a way to preserve the fisheries. So the specific question is, there is the moratorium on fishing, which is aimed at restoring some of the fishing stock, such as what China is doing in Hainan Island. Is that acceptable to other claimants of the South China Sea? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Da Costa? Yes? You, sir. I misread the name, but you're the person I meant. Go ahead.
I would like to address my question to Secretary Gasmin. I'm Renato de Castro from the Philippines. Since 2001, the Armed Forces of the Philippines has simply focused on internal security. So all the resources, attention, and personnel of the AFP have been focused on trying to manage the insurgencies, terrorist threats in the Philippines. But since the ascendancy of President Benito Aquino, there have been talks about the need to shift away from internal security to territorial-maritime defense. How important is the South China Sea issue in the recent decision for trends to move towards territorial defense? And that's the first question. And second, how will the alliance with the United States be factored in this very vital shift of the armed forces of the Philippines from internal security to maritime-territorial defense? Thank you very much.
I think that Mr. Story or Story.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. I have two brief questions. My first is to Secretary of Defense Gasmin. Last week there were reports that Chinese ships had unloaded construction materials at Amy Douglas Reef. If these stories are true, it's clearly the most serious violation of the DOC since it was signed in 2002. Are you able to share with us today more information about that incident? And also, how does the Philippines intend to respond? My second question is to General Tan. General Tan, a common theme of the Shangri-La Dialogue has been the importance of transparency because of the way it helps build trust and confidence and cooperation in the region. In 2009, there were reports that Vietnam had placed an order in Russia for 6-kilo class submarines. Are you able to confirm in this forum today that indeed Vietnam has signed an order with Russia for the purchase of 6 submarines? And if so, what was it that motivated you to buy those vessels?
Christian Lemire.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the panelists for their presentations. A question directed really to Mr. Tan and Secretary Gasmin. All the panelists made a big deal of trust and cooperation in the South China Sea. I wonder, as a first step, whether Vietnam and the Philippines in particular, given that they occupy more reefs and islands than anyone else in the Spratly Islands, might consider refraining from further construction on these features and even pushing towards an agreement on demilitarization and removal of occupations of these features in the Spratly Islands to enhance that regional trust and cooperation that they both wish to see.
There's a very specific example of a possible confidence-building measure. Mr. Liu.
Thank you. Phung Quang from Taiwan, Institute of International Relations. My question is addressing to Minister Tang. On your presentation, you especially addressed that currently the South China Sea is peace and everything seems fine, but you also addressed that in a couple months back there are several incidents happened. My question is especially addressing to you from your military perspective. How exactly you might be able to prevent such a possible conflict between Vietnam and China, perhaps a larger area, Vietnam and other claimants, since Taiwan is also part of this South China Sea. And I really like to learn how you, especially from military, not from diplomatic perspective, offer such peaceful measures to this dialogue. Thank you.
Mr. Emerson.
Yeah, one of the purposes of this dialogue is to explore a possible road